Let's call the meeting to order. This is the May 9th, 2023 Ocoee Planning and Zoning Commission. We'll do the call to order with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody stand. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, Lord God. Thank you for everything you do for us, Lord. Help us to make decisions tonight that help the welfare of our citizens, Lord. Please bless our first responders here in the city, our firefighters, and our police. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call, please.
Chair Lemnick,
Here.
Member Mellon,
Here.
Member Crocker,
Here.
Member Williams,
Here.
Member Forges,
Here.
Member Keller.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thanks. The consent agenda, can I please get a motion for approval for the minutes of April 11th, 2023?
So moved.
Second? Anybody?
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion to approve by Member Williams and a second by Member Forges. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, cool. We are going to use the buttons, though, for the next votes.
Oh, okay.
Not my bad. Old business, none. New business, LDC update. We're going to do the Articles 2 and 5 relative to kennels, pet care. Yes. Go ahead. Enoch.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members, and everyone in the audience. So this is, the entire agenda today is on one ordinance, and it deals with code changes. The code changes involve Articles 2, 4, 5, 2, 5, and 6, and also Table 1, the Table 5-1. Please forgive me. When I have this on, I can't see you, but I can see the screen, so I'm going to be doing this a lot. So the issue is, should the City Planning and Zoning Commission, acting as the local planning agency, recommend approval of an ordinance amending Section 2-4 in Article 2, which is the definitions, Section 5-4, which is, I lost my train of thought, open spaces, and also Table 5-1 in Article 5 and Section 6-4H relative to parking requirements in Article 6. The subject matter are impervious surface materials and regulations and animal kennels and pet care services. The ordinance also introduces a change to Table 5-1 in Article 5 to correct a scrivener's error that occurred in 2014. So we're just going to skip through to animals. Animal-related uses. Right now, the definitions provisions in Section 2-4 only has essentially 3 definitions. But when you look at them, we basically have 2 definitions. The first one is pet kennel or kennel pet. And the definition, as you see here in this slide, makes reference to 4 or more dogs. It doesn't speak to any other animals, and at an age of 6 months of age. And it also includes grooming or pet shops. The other definition is veterinary clinic or hospital, and that's any building that's designed to treat animals. They're not designed for grooming, boarding, and things like that, or for pet shops. And then the last one, animal hospitals, just defers you to clinics. The first issue is that last year, I believe it was last year, recently, the commission adopted the prohibition on the retail sales of cats and dogs and other household pets. And birds. So pet shops in these definitions would need to come out. But the main the main issue that staff is running across is that all these animal-related uses are essentially grouped into one use category in the use table 5-1, and it basically prohibits them everywhere except in C3 and I1. Including anything that's for outdoors. There's no zone in the city that allows for outdoor kennels. So we found that there's a need to introduce some distinction between more intense animal-related uses versus less intense animal-related uses. And so what we are recommending is that we revised the definition for kennel to basically say that it is a place where dogs and other house pets are kept, sheltered, boarded, or bred for compensation, and facilities for protection training, and then referencing the retail sale of cats, rabbits, and dogs to Article 43, Section 43.3, which recently now was changed to prohibit the sale. We put protection training in there because typically when you go to like county properties, the protection training is usually outdoors. It's usually more intense, larger gatherings. It's louder, things like that. We saw that as being different than like a basic obedience at the PetSmart or those types of facilities. Also changing the section and definitions to add a new definition for pet care services. Basically, it's using the the North American industry standard for pet care services that would include pet grooming, pet sitting, walking, basic obedience training services, non-medical activities and services, things that would enhance the appearance or obedience and hygiene of house pets. So it does not, it actually forbids pet training, protection training, pet kenneling, and the kenneling or other overnight boarding of any other dogs or house pets, to include rabbits, ferrets, or what have you. And also modifying Table 5-1 to add that new category. So what we are suggesting is that the less intense pet services category be allowed in the 2 agriculture zoning categories, and all of this commercial, so C1, C2, C3, and then the existing I1. The existing category, animal kennel and veterinary clinics, would still stay as it is, C3 and I1. So that's pretty much the recommendation relative to animal services. So we can pause there and entertain any questions.
Okay. This is all one motion,
It's
though,
one,
right?
yes.
Okay.
I can continue, or we can, however.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fine.
it doesn't-
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend, given that there's so many different topics, that we break it up into individual motions and a vote
Me too.
on each of these items, because otherwise it's going to be very confusing. I'll pass, I'll fail, this and that.
Me dose.
So, yes.
That's why I thought we were gonna do these separately from now on, but since last time was a little crazy with the. Okay, so, we're gonna just talk about, this is for Article 2 and 5. Are we gonna do those together? Is that suitable?
Well, or just a topic, because 2 and 5 also is relative to the impervious surface materials as
So,
well.
okay, then we'll talk about kennel and pet care.
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for staff on kennels and pet care?
I got a question and comment. I see y'all snuck in a word here, breeding. I would argue that word breeding needs to be line item vetoed out of this. Because that is not why? Because it's basically allowing somebody to come in here with a breeding station where they just breed and, where's I got wrote down right here? Breed for compensation, so you can have like one of these puppy mills that's exactly what that word is there for, is to allow a puppy mill to come in here.
One second. I'm sorry to interrupt you. If we can keep comments and thoughts till after we close
Okay.
the public hearing for now, just any questions to staff.
Okay, this question is, why did y'all add breeding to section 2-4, 328?
The breeding was already originally there. I believe the prohibition that the city commission adopted was for the retail sales. So that ordinance didn't prohibit breeding. It just prohibited the retail sales.
Well, it actually prohibited breeding because it says, but not for the sale, breeding, grooming, or boarding of, under that, what a veterinary clinic or hospital is. So it's like it's been taken and not for has been kind of ex-nayed and added back in under the new section.
Which definition of pet services? So I can go to that one on
Under, it
the,
says veterinary clinic or hospital, the old section defined it as any building or portion thereof designed or used for the veterinary care, surgical procedures, or treatment of animals, but not for the sale, breeding, grooming, or boarding of well animals or pet shops. Now, that's all been kind of moved to the new section with not for removed from the writing.
Okay, let me clarify. So if you would, on this slide's definition 328, that's existing. We're not changing that. So veterinary clinic or hospitals doesn't include a facility. That clinic or hospital wouldn't be allowed to include sale or breeding or grooming of well animals or to be used for pet shops.
Correct. But then you add the where it says, under below is a summary of the proposed LDC amendments. Revise the definition of kennel pet to read as follows: a place where dogs and other house pets are kept, sheltered, boarded, or bred for the compensation, and facilities for protection training.
Yes, because right now, in the ordinance that was passed, and I can double check it, it didn't prohibit the kennels. It just prohibited the retail sales of dogs and cats. And
Right, but a
Wouldn't
kennel is
that be a
different than
retail sale?
a kennel
Yes.
or breeding is different than a sales shop like PetSmart or what have you.
Or- yeah.
But puppy mill is totally different animal.
I have a question, sorry to interrupt you. My understanding is where that says breeding is, in my home, I have a boxer. If I want to breed my boxer and sell it, I can do that. I don't want to stop people from doing that. Is that what this is referring to?
this wouldn't be stopping that because that was already addressed at this
Correct.
previous
But
ordinance.
But is it when it's talking about for breeding and whatnot, are we talking about in a residential aspect?
No, this is a commercial kennel facility.
Okay.
Yep.
Did you have any other questions?
No.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, I'm going to open up the public hearing. Did you want to speak, sir? Absolutely. Come on up. There's a card for you there. If you'll just put your perfect. Give your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Matt Smith, and I live in Longwood, 1201 Murcott Court, up in Longwood, Florida. So I'm the owner of Sit Means Sit Dog Training, and we currently have a training facility located in Longwood. We employ right at 25 trainers, and we are looking to expand. So we have been searching for the past 18 months. We've probably attempted close to 8 different times with different letters of intent and things like that in different cities all across Central Florida. And we have been able to secure a location in the city of Ocoee. And so if this article, we can get the language to read properly, what the business would able to serve the city would, our plan is to have, it's a 5,800 square foot facility that this would allow us to operate within. Our business is what's called a day and train model business, so we do not board overnight. I do currently have a kennel license in Longwood with Seminole County. We would not be looking to plan to do that here. So this would allow us to open up. The goal would be to have well over 12 to 15 trainers, and so it's not huge, but it does help the local city. But also, I don't know the exact statistics of dog bites and different things in the city, but that would help serve the city as well to have dog training. So last year we did 943 dogs up in Longwood, and we would only look to expand that here in the city. And so I'm looking, if this motion article could read correctly, how could Sit Means Sit serve the city of Ocoee through employment as well as dog safety, educational things, just overall helping the community regarding dogs. That is pretty much what I would like to see to come be a part of the city of Ocoee.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? No? Okay. I'm gonna close the public hearing, bring it back up to the dais. If somebody would like to make a motion on this, a motion for recommendation on the kennels and pet care portion,
Or if they want to discuss it.
or if you'd like to discuss it more.
I think discussion more is pretty needed. Otherwise, I'm going to make a motion to just decline, only for the bred for compensation. You know, I'm all for training, kennel, but not a puppy mill, you know, coming in here and literally, you know, yeah, I'm not for a puppy mill.
I think we're going to be a little bit careful by, you know, some of the, you know, words we say, right? I mean, I get it, right? It's a you know, it's a gotcha word to say puppy mill and things of that nature, but we can't group all businesses into that same name, right? So if, you know, there's other people that do legal, perfectly healthy,
In your house,
breeding.
I agree. This is under kennels. This isn't under your own personal backyard,
I
growing
understand.
whatever. This is a kennel where it says bred for compensation. This was not in here before like this. This is added, this is new. And it doesn't really need to be in here, because it's, you know, we still have the pet shops, you could buy pet set. We have the veterinary clinics, we have the training, great when we have a boarding, you know, where we can bring our pets when we go on vacation, but a separate place strictly for breeding, for compensation is my hang-up.
Mr. Chair, if I can,
Yeah.
only because, as everybody up here knows, I got a couple of big puppies, 2 Great Danes, and and all of my Danes have always been from breeders. I don't like going to a pet shop to go get a Great Dane. I like going to a breeder. Now, most breeders probably fall under the category of kennel, though, because they've got 4 or 5 dogs that they are just using for breeding. But by no stretch of the imagination would I put any of the Dane breeders that I've used over the past 12, 15 years as puppy mills. So I can see where you're going with it, and yeah, I think we all want to make sure that we don't have the puppy mill in here, which is somebody just, hey, okay, let's get 20 dogs and see how fast we can pump them out here. But at the same time, a true breeder who just breeds that type of dog isn't going to be me. I'm not, you know, I got 2 Great Danes, I got a male, female, let me, you know, go and get some, because both of mine are AKC registered, so I can have AKC puppies. What you're gonna find is you want reputable breeders to come in for something like that, and I think in order to do that, you're going to have to allow under the kennel
Correct.
criteria that you would be able to have a breeder come in.
Then don't line item out 4 or more dogs. You can actually set a number of how many dogs you can breed, but it was scratched out, big old line right through it.
Yeah.
Yes, it did, kennel, what we're changing it to is right here, has a line through it. Right, you see the line?
But the first definition was dealing with vets. This is the new definition, nothing was scratched out, it was added in.
This one on the screen is the new definition.
First definition is the existing.
Right, but what is this sheet here then with it line itemed right out?
I'm saying the second is new.
Section
nothing was-
167,
The second is new, we're adding it.
correct.
So nothing was scratched out and hidden. We were proposing it as new language.
Right here, what does this mean with this line right through on 167?
On the screen, the first bullet is existing. So all these 3 bullets are existing. And to Mr. Mellon's point, the word breed isn't in the kennel definition, but so essentially, if it's absent, the interpretation could be that it's allowed or it could be prohibited. This is the proposed definition that includes bred for compensation and protection training, but typically, I mean, this is a good conversation topic, but to Mr. Lomnick's point, not all facilities are bad facilities, perhaps maybe tweaking it to pull out bread for compensation as its own line category. But I feel like this was hashed out at the city commission hearings, a series of hearings where retail sales was what came out being
Correct.
prohibited.
Right, but retail sales is a little bit different than breeding, like in-house. I mean, could there be a concession that we set like a number of dogs? Would that
You
be?
can't set a
Then I'm
number
voting no on
of
it.
dogs
Then
because the
let's vote.
dog's gonna have however many dogs it's gonna have,
But
right?
you can, most certainly, there's already one right here, which kept 4 or more dogs. You can already set a litmus for how
If
many
you have
dogs
a
that
breeder
can be
that
breeding.
has a pregnant dog, it can't say, well, only 4 can come out.
No, but you can say I can only have 4 breeding
Yeah,
dogs,
breeding
not 20 breeding dogs or 100
This was
breeding
not
dogs.
intended to, this is a definition, and, I mean, I guess, there's no malice here to.
I know, I'm just afraid that something will happen and it'll
Well,
become,
but
I
our
mean, we've
commission
all been,
also
y'all
did
see
say
what's
pet
going
sale,
on.
they're allowed.
Yeah, pet sales are.
That's
100%.
that's gonna be my next question, but.
The county has said no, but
Let,
we have said yes.
let me bring this back up to, you know, I personally don't ever want to limit the right of a business owner that is a law-abiding business owner to make a living, right? And starting to add, you know, this is just like we don't put restrictions on uses, you know, you can't tell a barber shop you can't come here, right? It'd be the same thing. My question is, and I think you've already addressed it, I'm gonna ask one more time. Why is breeders put in there? Is it because it's not in there now, which means it's
Is that
good
like
to
a
go?
national definition of pet kennel, or where did we get that?
It's something that I had written previously that worked well in another jurisdiction after a series of hearings. So if you don't use a kennel for breeding of animals, whether they be dogs or cats or horses, what would it otherwise be? Most of the quality breeders tend to have nice facilities, farms. They breed out. A good breeder who does health screening would breed not on rotation. So they would wait to see, some of them even see if the male and female are attracted to each other before they even allow them to breed. Some of them are breeding from sperm that have been frozen for 30 years. So, and I know that because I have a giant schnauzer and it's essentially rare here in Florida. I waited 2 years for my dog. She's a very expensive dog. She's actually in boarding right now. But a quality breeder is going to have like a farm or some acreage where it's done correctly. I understand Mr. Mellon's concern too, but I see your side in that if we take it out completely, what are we doing to those people who are wanting to do it right?
Correct.
They're gonna do it in their backyard and.
If
I
my
can tell you, the German
veterinarian-
Shepherd that I got in North Georgia, they sold him to me at 7 weeks, and I don't know if he was a runt, but I don't know if they did gene testing. He had a serious temperament. I spent thousands of dollars on training, and he is still fearful, and he is 3 years old and still on a muzzle. So, and she was a backyard breeder. I did not know what I know now compared to back then, but yeah.
I'd like to move on from that for a minute and bring up the statute that was, you know, what the commission came up with. I want to make sure that, you know, this doesn't affect our current grandfathered puppy store, or whatever you want to call it, whatever their business is, that this doesn't affect that, or the additional location, I believe, that they're allowed to open.
This wouldn't override that ordinance, and I would defer to Robin on that, but the intent here is not to override. The ordinance changes to Chapter 43, because this isn't speaking to Chapter 43.
Okay. Good on that?
I agree because it specifically talks about, references the other section of the code. So it's definitely meant to exclude those provisions
Yeah.
from this definition.
Okay, because I believe, if I remember correctly, they are allowed to open one more store in the city if they wanted to. And I just want to make sure if they were coming through the process, if this didn't stop them from doing
If that were to come in, I can pull it up here. It would go through a separate, it will go through the same process, but we will look at it as far as the use goes. One, whether or not it's a C3 or I1 zoning district.
Okay.
And then we would look at the animal services, the
Cool.
animal chapter in the
Okay.
Code of Ordinances.
Then I'd like to ask another question about this gentleman and his business. So with this, then, we would then make sure that a gentleman like this could not bring his business to Ocoee?
His business, we spoke at length with myself, him, and his realtor. He's a hourly pet training. The dogs come in for hour by hour, or they buy programs, but they don't stay. They either go, the owners stay, or they're dropped off, and then their owners come back and pick them up. So there's no overnight stays.
Okay, so this would not affect him.
So he falls
Correct. This would
under-
actually allow him to do it.
Doing
Okay.
anything to
Yeah.
the bread for compensation has nothing to do with it.
No, I'm moving on, yeah, I'm moving on.
So Member Mellon may say, I agree with everything but that sentence. I want
That's-
to add that definition in, even want to make it, another definition says prohibited or, a no-no, but, so.
Mr. Chair, if I may, that would be my question, is if there was a way to modify this to make
like,
it more
to-
acceptable, rather than a wholesale strike it out.
Right, so like, 6 breeding dogs or something like that. I just would really hate, even as a resident here, because we all are residents of the city, to have someplace pop up and has 100 breeding dogs.
Well, pet kennel's only allowed in C3 and I1.
Just delete it.
And what's and then,
So whatever you do in your house is what you do with your house. So
Right.
this is someone doing a business in C3 and I1. pet
right,
kennel.
which is, what's the number?
So, yeah, so that's why I wouldn't even want to get into regulating dog, like the number.
Gotcha.
We're not going to go in and count heads and, so it's either
It'd
the
be
use is
too hard to
permitted or it's not.
enforce.
Yeah. So under the definition, we would say it either stays, it is a function of what pet kennels do. So if that part of the definition comes out, then we would address to say,
Well, what is the number? I mean, anybody, you say 6, I say 8, or
Right.
she says
is
10.
the dog there
Yeah,
during the
yeah,
day?
so,
You have 10 dogs come in,
Right.
3 leave, has it 7 or was it 10? And yeah.
Yeah, setting a number,
Or you
like,
take it out and you can make it like a variance per se, like,
Okay.
people can come in.
Sorry to interrupt. Let's bring it back. Okay, we got a lot going on here. So if you want to if you'd like to make a recommendation that you like this language, Jason, if you make the motion for a recommendation for this and strike breeder, it would still be allowed in the city because it's not in the statute. So what you would have to do is make a motion to recommend approval, this without breeder, and then you'd have to make another motion, I believe, to make some sort of language for breeder
Right.
in that situation,
I
because
don't think that for even making the motion.
as
we
what,
did it.
as what zoning manager Whitfield has said, since it's not currently in the language, it's allowed. But I would caution you to say that by putting any kind of restriction on that, you are possibly limiting the rights of perfectly good law-abiding business owners.
Yeah. I'm not going to make that motion. I'll just vote accordingly. I don't think I'd get a second, to be quite honest, so.
I have a comment here.
Yes, sir.
It says under here that it's for retail sale of dogs, cats, and rabbits. I mean, what about snakes, boas, pythons?
that was language specifically from the ordinance that was passed last year.
Okay, so that's a different ordinance.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
It's already been passed.
okay.
Yeah, and you could Google household pets and get a plethora.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And it's your
I didn't see why
donkeys
it was
and it's just-
restricted, yeah, or et cetera.
Okay, so at this point, I would like to ask somebody if they would like to make a motion for recommendation as the way it reads for kennels and pet care.
So I'll make that motion. So I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission, acting in its role as the local planning agency, recommend approval of section, do I need to identify it by section, or can I just, okay. Section 2-4, 167, and section 2-4328 to the revised
238.
238, I'm sorry, 238, to the revised language and the new definitions and the modification to table 5.1
Sure.
as recommended by staff.
Before anybody gives me a second, Mike, do you have something that you're? Okay. We have a recommendation for approval. Do I have a second?
I second that.
All right, we have a recommendation for approval by Member Williams and a second by Member Forges. We're gonna vote with our yes or no's here. Go ahead. Okay. Carries 4-1. Thank you very much, sir. Good luck. We hope to see your business soon. Have a great day. Okay, now we have the second part of this, which is the clarification on impervious surface materials and correction of
Scrivener's.
Scrivener's errors.
Okay.
You want to tell me what Scrivener's means first?
The writer.
Ah, okay.
Thank you, Robin.
I was thinking of it like scribbling,
Yeah,
but
that's what
that's
I
not what it, what it is.
So these are also separated because it's just easier in volume to present it. Impervious surface materials and areas. So the bullets in this slide are existing definitions, existing regulations. So in section 2.4, currently we do not have a definition for impervious surface material. We have a definition for impervious material, impervious lot coverage, which basically describes what percentage of the lot is being covered by impervious materials, but it doesn't actually tell you what is an impervious material. The second section reference there is from the parking regulations. There's a provision in there that requires a minimum 2-foot setback from the side and rear property lines where neither paved, asphalt, concrete, brick, or unpaved gravel and mulch materials are allowed. So the glitch here is that it includes mulch. So that's, there's another section that I'll bring up where impervious mulch is brought up. So in 5-4, section K, it speaks to the open space regulations, and it basically says that no open space area on a single-family home can be covered with impervious materials, to include impervious mulch. And so it lists stone, gravel, and rock, but then impervious mulch is also, again, stone, gravel, and mulch. So it's hard to really put a finger on it, but it's difficult in terms to implement because people don't understand what exactly is included as an impervious material. So we are attempting to find a distinction between impervious material, like the regular impervious materials, rocks, gravel, things like that, and mulch, and have a distinction between not only the type of mulch, like synthetic mulch versus natural mulch, but also the use of natural mulch for parking, where over time it's compacted, or they have taken the grass out, compacted the dirt, then put in base sand, and then compacted that, and then put in synthetic mulch or other things. So it's causing drainage issues. It's also causing people to have failed permits because they're not meeting their maximum impervious. So the issue that we are seeing quite frequently now is increases in backyards and side yards where pretty much the entirety of the backyard is covered with some form of impervious. Some permits that we've seen have their side yards as well, also covered up in an impervious, as well as driveway expansions being very wide. Like they're still within the 50% for the front, but it's sometimes they're pretty massive driveways. We have an application that's pending now where it's a 3-car garage driveway that's asking to further widen their driveway. And the issue that it's having is drainage and the non-compliance with the impervious surface area, and then also open space. So I have a few examples. This one was a pool permit. If you can follow my mouse, this line here represents the extent of the pool deck. they have an existing very large screen porch that's pretty much the width of the entire house, and then this is the body of the pool itself. So it meets the code. They have a slight increase in their impervious for the driveway. It's still within the max impervious. But what they've done is they've put all this other stuff. So everything else around the pool has either been built up with a retaining wall, the gravel's been put in, the rest of the side yards is all synthetic turf. This is just one side of the yard. The opposite yard is also the same. It goes up to the fence line. So this one failed inspection, and they are in the process of removing that material so they can be compliant. But what's happened, like in this scenario, is the property owner has one contractor that does the pool, then somebody else will get another contractor to do the screen enclosure, and then somebody else will say, oh, the property owner, while this work is going on, they'll go out themselves and hire a landscape contractor to come in and do the other hardscape without a permit. So the green and the rocks that you see there are all unpermitted. The retaining wall is also unpermitted. This is another example. Again, a pool permit. You can see the outline for the pool deck more. It's pretty large. This is the pool itself. Similarly, they failed inspection before they install the impervious materials. So thankfully for this homeowner, when our inspectors went out to the site, they noticed it, that all the grass has been taken out, and they had already started laying down the base sand. He failed inspection and stopped work before the homeowner actually invested the monies to put in the synthetic turf, which is what they're originally planned to do. So this is, the top is one side of the yard, the bottom is the other side of the yard, and you'll see in this picture here, there are large tiles, and the green is synthetic turfing. So essentially, it's all impervious. So they are in the process of reworking everything that you see here. Back here again, this top picture, that retaining wall is unpermitted. They slightly raised the ground up and added and filled it up with gravel. So none of this has been permitted. This is an example of an existing condition where the impervious was observed on site by staff. So this property, the driveway has been widened. The pink line is essentially the property line, but on the aerials, it's off by a foot or two. And they pretty much paved the entire length of their side yard all the way to the back and has this big thing parking. I don't know what they're using that for. It's hard to tell with the trees. So they received a request from the city to submit a permit. They submitted a permit. This is the existing conditions survey, and you can see in this survey, all this concrete is going right up to the back and the side property lines. I believe with this property, there's also an easement, so the concrete is in the easement. They've also asked to put a shed right here that is outside of their property line. So this one is still in rejected status. The property owner has not come back to the city to work with us at all. Essentially, they'd have to remove quite a bit of this concrete to be compliant. This is the situation where this property owner recently purchased this home. It's in one of the newer subdivisions. They came and met with the city. They met with me, actually, and I advised them on the limits of the impervious surface materials. She was not happy that she essentially couldn't build anything else on her yard because the house pretty much ate up the entire max impervious. But a few months after that, I was doing a permit for another site near this area, and I noticed that all of this had been built. Nothing in the red circle has been permitted. So it's pending code enforcement action because they've obviously exceeded their max impervious because their original house was very close to the max, and they did it without a permit. So some clarifications. We are proposing to revise the existing impervious surface, impervious lot coverage definition to actually be an impervious materials definition. The current language really speaks to more like a purpose and intent statement. It doesn't actually define it. So we're going to take that out and add a new definition of what it includes, and I want to turn to that section. So impervious materials would include any material that redirects or modifies the flow of water horizontally along a surface, or that prohibits, prevents, or otherwise significantly limits the ability for natural absorption of water into the ground. So the new definition includes some examples: concrete, asphalt, pavers, pervious pavers, gravel, rocks, solid decking, synthetic mulch, synthetic turf, roofs that are impervious to weather. So we have seen situations where the permit comes in for a pergola with the wooden slats where, it goes right down. But those pergola inspections fail because the homeowner has installed the metal composite roofing or the plastic roofing, so it essentially is another shed structure. And then pervious materials that are used in landscaping traditionally that would be considered impervious if they're used for parking because of the consistent compaction of the ground, and it essentially is diverting still the water to go elsewhere, or it's causing puddling. I actually spoke with one permit applicant whose permit I failed because they designed their lot so that they would direct their runoff to their neighbors' yards. So we've seen all kinds of different scenarios. Here, there was one where they directed their runoff into city property. So that's the new definition of impervious materials, and then just cleaning up the, what is impervious coverage, doing the math correctly in the definition. So that's section 2-4 in Article 2. Moving on to section 5-4 in Article 5, and section 6-4, we are asking for changes so that it's clear what the impervious materials are, making a reference to the definition in Article 2, clearly stating that the 2-foot setback is there for the side and rear for purposes of drainage flows and maintaining open space. And then making it clear that you can use, some materials like gravel or like pea gravel or the nice rocks in your landscape bed, or mulch in your landscape beds and things like that. But it wouldn't be impervious if you used it throughout your entire backyard, because you basically, my personal opinion, you're not going to spend $200-300 for a truckload hauled in and then just lay it down. It'll just run around. You have to prep the ground first, and that prepping is actually what causes the drainage issue, because they're leveling out the dirt, their backyards, and then compacting it, then laying it down. Right. Or putting down the commercial grade weed barriers, packing that down, and then putting more materials on top. We've had some people complain because we consider pervious pavers as impervious. It's not that the pervious pavers themselves are impervious. I've gone to those demonstrations where you're holding a brick paver and then a pervious paver. You run them both under the same faucet of water. One displaces the water, the other one the water goes through, but it's the installation and the maintenance over time. It's those pores that get filled over time that causes that area to become impervious. Some homeowners, like my father, not in this city, he actually goes back and he puts the quick mix dust on top, lets it settle, sprays some water on it, and it essentially fills concrete into those pores. So that's why we put pervious pavers as an impervious surface material. So going back to the 2-foot setback, if someone wanted to put pavers and whatnot, and they're still meeting their maximum impervious surface area, and They just didn't want to maintain the grass. We've recommended that people plant ground cover. We've said that they can start looking at like pine straws, just laying it down as it is, or just sodding it back with a sod that is less maintenance, things like that. So there are options that they can, that are still available to them. I think that was the last recommendation. So this one, we didn't have a lot of changes. It's mostly cleanup, but the biggest change is adding the definition for what an impervious material is, and then making the distinction, calling out some examples of them and making the distinction as far as how they impact drainage and water flow.
And Mr. Chairman, Manoj did a great job. She covered. We have, with regards to the pavered patios, we get a lot of people, they bring in the brochure that says it achieves 50% imperviousness, but that's on the sales literature. We've said, bring us the engineering literature. St. John's does not agree. St. John's does not assign a perviousness to it. We do provide a credit that St. John's does not. We allow you to take out your pool water area because typically you leave several inches, 4 inches. So we give a credit there. And we have recently worked with, our Public Works has worked with a turf company on engineering that St. John's is going to recognize that if the turf is put in, artificial turf, under this process, it achieves X percent imperviousness. That's on its way, but it's not there yet. And then finally, I want to say, the older subdivisions that don't have drainage ponds, our code requires a 50% maximum impervious. Under the new subdivisions, the new plan unit developed subdivisions, those plans, those subdivisions are engineered with a maximum impervious per lot. And as regulators, we review it differently than that one homeowner that says, it's no big deal if I totally paver my whole property, what's it going to do? Well, if 50% of the lots do it, the pond that is signed and sealed has a permit from St. John's in the city, that pond will not function as designed because it has more impervious. It is receiving more impervious, means the water is getting to the pond faster. It's not having the nitrates cleaned out of it. So it is an issue. Some jurisdictions don't care about it. We do, and we've seen with the storms, we haven't had many flooding issues with properties. We have some subdivisions that have soft soils over Cross Creek and Weston Bay. That's just the underlying. But the 2-foot separation from the property line, because if you pave it, you're going to put it at a 1% slope toward your neighbor, right? You're not going to have it bird bath pool up in your yard. And so it is amazing how many permits we deal with for just this imperviousness. Where it comes into play also is with a home-based business or somebody that wants to add parking in front of their house. There's a provision that says no more than 50% of your front yard can be used for parking, but it has to be designated through these mulch, rocks, pavers, and so that comes into the overall calculation. So if somebody wants to put parking in front of their house up to 50%, we count it as impervious because they're constantly putting that pressure down on it by driving on it. So there's a lot of things that come into play with this, and these are all land development code items that we need to address. I'll talk about different land development code items later on, but these are these low-hanging fruit that we deal with. Things change, they come in waves, you get fresh eyes to look at it, and so we're cleaning it up and making it more, as we train these installers out there, this just helps with that, so thanks. Just want to give you that background.
All right, cool. Anybody have any questions for staff?
Question, back to the home that put in the
Which one?
area which was not permitted, back to that?
The one with the pergola or the pool? Or?
The last
Is
one?
your mic
That
on?
was
Is
new
your-
home, the big
Oh,
house from the
yes.
lot. I don't think
Sorry,
they had-
turn your mic on, please. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't think, it didn't look like they had 30% of their land was not housed in that.
It was.
You go back to it,
This
right
one?
there.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
that looks like that house takes up more than 60% of the.
Yes.
Yeah, and so how was that ever permitted? I mean, when you bought
50%.
that house, they had to be told you could not add a pool to that house.
So unfortunately, this one was never permitted. This one
Right.
was done without a permit. Sadly, property owners aren't being told. The majority of the time, the house takes up the biggest chunk. I actually so when property owners come in and they want to make some improvements, like I helped a lady today, she just bought her house and she wants to add a paver area. Just the calculations of her house, excluding the entirety of the pool area completely, is already 200 square feet over.
Right.
And now she wants to add something else. So from what I've observed, a lot of times the property owners don't know that they don't have much.
So if you look at the two
opportunity.
houses on either side of that one, I mean, they can't really add anything else to those lots, right?
Correct. And sometimes, if it's a two-story house, they get the square footage for the home because it's 2 stories,
Right.
but the footprint is smaller. So those homes have the ability to do that. And so the neighbor will say, well, my neighbor 2 blocks down has a pool, why can't I put in a pool? Well, you bought a 1-story building that eats up more of your impervious area.
He mentioned a 30%. Is he talking about the?
No, I thought it was, I heard 30% of your land had to be,
No.
No, it varies. So all the residential zoning districts is capped at 50%.
50%.
The PUDs that Mike mentioned, some of them go as high as 60, some of them go as high as 70, 75. I've seen some that's 75.
Right.
And we have recently denied, well, not denied, we're working with an applicant who wants to go practically to that 75 mark.
I'm just wondering how that got, you said this was not permitted through the city?
The back, the house was, everything in the circle was not.
Right.
Yes.
So even if you permitted that, it still didn't look like you had, enough,
Nothing left over.
Nothing left over
Wide
from the
driveway,
house.
probably
Yep.
wide sidewalk, yeah.
I mean, you look at the front, there's about 10% in the front. I mean, the driveway's bigger than the,
Yes, that's a 3-car garage, it looks like.
yeah. So
So-
I'm just wondering how that gets permitted through the city.
Well, because they have to meet, they can't exceed maximum impervious.
Right,
The house
That-
didn't
That
exceed.
house and the driveways did not, but it brought it right up to that maximum.
okay.
That's a newer subdivision, so that probably has a 65%.
Yeah, I believe this one had 60.
Okay.
All right, anybody else have any other questions? I do. So I know you're talking about the pet grass or whatever we're calling the turf, right? If you think that it's coming soon to where the imperviousness will be okay, right? Is that what did I hear
No,
you?
this is one brand, one installation of an artificial turf. So if somebody uses that company, that installation, they will get credit based off of whatever percent impervious that St. John's gives it.
So the thatch of that grass it doesn't have holes in it to let the water
It does,
weep?
but it's what you do. You bring in dirt, you bring in clay, and you tamp it down. And there's a base, a sub-base, so the water goes through that, through the carpet or through the brick, but then it hits that layer, and then where does it go? It doesn't seep in. It's gotta have the seep, that's what the pervious does. The water can seep in.
But if I have a strip of grass that's behind my pool cage, right? Let's say, I'll use a friend's house, right, that's over off of Clark Road. They have a strip that's this wide, between their pool cage and their fence. And they can't mow it because, just can't mow it, too much dirt. If they just rolled out the grass on top of it, would that be,
So let me clarify, it's not that we're not allowing it, it's that it can't be, if it's so much of it that it exceeds the 50%, then they would have to pick where they would have to remove it elsewhere.
they already there because they've already extended their porch, they've extended their screen cage, so they're probably already there. But if they're not making any changes to the ground of the dirt that's already there, they're just rolling the grass out.
Yeah, we can't do on ifs and buts and candy and nuts.
No, I get it, but
It's no.
But these are all, there's,
Yeah.
what about Florida product approval? A lot of these are already product approved and recognized by the state
But
legislation
not
as
for
a.
imperviousness.
right.
That they're product approved for safety, for carcinogen, whatever, but it's not imperviousness.
All right, anybody else? I'm gonna open up the public hearing. I'm gonna close the public hearing. This is for, I would need a motion, a recommendation for the clarification on impervious surface materials and,
And Mr. Chairman, I can tell you, and please correct me, but it looks as though this is we're asking for an amendment to Article 2, Section 2-4 definitions. We can go into the subsections 90, 159, 160, and 185. Also, Article 5, Section 5-4, and Article 6, Section 6-4H.
Okay, yes,
that
H,
correct?
I'm sorry,
Okay.
yes, H.
And so a motion could be,
To what she just
moved
said.
as to what the city attorney just said.
Somebody make a recommendation either way to what the city attorney just beautifully
I'll make
spelled
that
out.
motion and recommendation for what the city attorney just said with all the numbers and.
Thank you. We have a motion for recommendation for approval. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, Member Mellon made a motion for recommendation of approval to what the city attorneys told us, and then Member Williams has seconded it. We're gonna vote here on our yes or no's. All right, carries clean. Thank you. All right, that's, we done with all that? Did
One
that
more.
take
One
care-
more.
Oh, well, no, we gotta do the
Scrivener's
scriveners,
error.
the scribble errors.
You know, this is you get somebody new and they want to show you where you've messed up over time. That's all this is.
Scrivener.
Sorry, Mike. So Scrivener's error is in relation to Table 5-1, but the definitions that you see here are from Article 2 Section 2-4 in Article 2, but this one would not change anything relative to this error in 2 because the definitions are fine. It's only here for information. So we have two definitions. One is agriculture, and I put the entirety of the definition in here. But you'll see that the first one is less intense. It's farming, lands used for agricultural purposes, farming, dairying, pasturing, apiculture, horticulture, everything, and those necessary accessory uses. But the operation of such accessory shall be secondary. So the packaging would be secondary. The treating of or storing of produce would be secondary. Farming itself would be primary. The second definition is agricultural processing. And in our definition itself, it states that it's a permanent industrial use, specifically associated with producing, harvesting, or processing of ag products, as opposed to growing such products, which is the first definition. So this is the more intense use category. So what's happened over the years is that with ordinance changes and updates or changes to Table 5-1, sometimes agriculture comes first and agricultural processing. Sometimes agricultural processing came first and agriculture came in second. And then the S's and P's and prohibitions, in the use table followed their use categories. But in 2014, the use determination of whether or not the use is allowed didn't follow their categories. So the current use table prohibits the less intense agriculture, farming use from all of the agriculture and residential zoning districts, and it allows by right the more intense ag processing industrial use by right. So this is just to correct that Scrivener's error, to basically put the P's back where they belong and strike the P's where they don't belong. So this one is simple. That's it.
All right. Anybody have any questions for staff?
So who exactly? No.
I think Member Mellon wants to add breeding to the agriculture.
Yeah, he does.
If we could add chickens in there, though. Whew.
Would this affect somebody who's growing roses?
No, so what happened is, see, the agriculture has the PPP, and the agricultural processing had a P or a dot. The agricultural processing somehow made it to that cell where agriculture was, and agriculture moved down.
Okay.
And so it had the wrong Ps and dots, so this is flipping it back.
Okay, cool.
I blame that on a planner that's not here anymore.
True that. I'm going to open the public hearing. I'm going to close the public hearing. Anybody else have any other questions for staff? I'll take a motion for recommendation, please.
So, Mr. Chair, I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of staff's recommendation to correct Scrivener's error in the stated section, Table 5-1.
All right, that's great. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion for recommendation by Member Williams with a second by Member Cocker. If everybody will get your votes there. Passes again. All right, we done with this one now?
Yes.
Perfect.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to share, if you recall, we brought an amendment to you several months back where we wanted to separate out indoor commercial facilities versus outdoor commercial facilities, because previously it was allowed by right, both of those. And we pulled them out to where the outdoor would be a special exception. Since that hearing, I have received 3 requests from people wanting to do an outdoor commercial recreational facility next to single-family homes. So thanks to that change, we were able to protect those neighborhoods.
That's great. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, miscellaneous project status reports.
So the June meeting was canceled because there was going to be a election. And looking at that, also looking at, the chairman has asked to try not to cancel P&Z meetings, bring something forward. We are working on, we have 3 projects, 3 subdivisions that we're hoping to have in time for a meeting in June. Now, remember, we canceled the June 13th meeting, but the commission allowed us to open up other dates for a June meeting for planning and zoning. So I want to say, we're going to look at the last week of June to potentially have a meeting, but we're trying to get something on the agenda. So we may not have anything to put on the agenda by that time. Might. So we will tell you if we're not having a meeting. So if you don't hear anything, look for your emails, you'll get a packet.
Did you say the last?
The last week, so
That's
we're
a
going to
code
be a
enforcement
Monday, Wednesday, or Thursday. They have code enforcement on Tuesday nights. So I'm going to ask you, if we have it on the last week of June, is there a night that's preferable at a Monday, Wednesday, and a Thursday?
Is it too late to do it the week prior, like the Wednesday after the city commission?
Well, we didn't want to do it on Juneteenth, and then we have a commission meeting on the 20th. The issue is that week that the meeting was canceled, the second week, I'm out of town that whole week. So we're going to have an issue getting a packet together. What happens is they got to resubmit, we got to review it,
Yep.
then we got to advertise, and it's just a tight schedule.
Is the Monday, the 26th?
Monday,
Okay.
20th, and that's up to you.
Does anybody have any objection with Monday, the 26th?
No.
We have a consensus for that? Blue?
I like Tuesdays.
Tuesday is a code
meeting
enforcement
on
meeting.
Tuesday.
All right.
You can come sit in here and watch code enforcement do their
And
thing.
then I would imagine everybody else like me is probably going on vacation the 28th for the 4th of July weekend, so.
Oh, yeah,
That's a good weekend.
So the Monday would probably be the best.
okay.
I think we have
Let's-
consensus to have a
okay.
meeting that week. And if you can't bring anything for that, maybe Robin would do something for us that week.
Well, we would do that in July because the commission's gonna, it depends. But here's another thing, you guys, whoever's up for, their seat is up, they get to serve the month of June. It is a new sitting board in July. New, might have new members, it's just after the 3
After the
positions are up.
And I was going to say to all of you, most of you probably know, Scott Cookson and I are resigning from being city attorney and assistant city attorney. In the letter of resignation, Scott stated that our contract provides that we would give 90 days' notice, but of course, we will stay a shorter time if a replacement is found sooner, a longer time if it's needed. So at this point, I'm not sure what my date will be. Having said that, if I were newly coming into this, I would prefer to do the training myself rather than have someone else do it. But if it looks as though it's going to go on for an extended period of time and staff and the commission wants, this commission wants me to do this training as we planned in July, of course, I'm available to do it. My question about the July meeting was, are we going to, if we do the June meeting at the end of June, are then 2 weeks later going to have July?
We would. I mean, we have other projects that would be tracking that way.
Okay, all right. So it's really up to all of you and the timing on when our replacement comes into the city.
Well, we got good news. You can be replaced.
Thank you.
Did you have any thoughts or comments on that? Okay. I'm like, thought you were gonna give us some big revelation.
Yeah.
Okay, so consensus to do that then in June
Yeah, so Monday, June 26th would be the date.
and the training?
No, the training would be
Leave it
July.
for July.
Yes.
Okay, great, cool. All right, we have consensus on that, so that's great. What else?
We have begun the task of comprehensive plan update. We are in our data and analysis portion. That's the first step. So we have to we have to provide all the data, how many parks we have, what's the transportation network look like, what's our population now, what do we want it to be in 20 years, utility, what's our level of service, well, how do we want to grow, and we take all that information, and then we start coming up with goals, objectives, and policies. We will be bringing those to this commission as a land planning agency later on. We are also undertaking a full land development code update. Notch has been working on some of these other issues that are not development related, but we are in the process of working toward an RFP to hire experts to help us update our land development code. The land development code does a number of things, but we need to have a code that tells development how to develop in the suburban areas of Ocoee. We have a number of target areas that have specific guidelines. The target area 1 and 2 in our CRA, our downtown, our business and Plant Street and interchange character area. And we also need code for those, and we need code for our downtown. They're not all the same. We don't want to do one form-based code for the whole city. So we've begun that process. That may track about the same time. So if you're around later on this year, we might have some really cool stuff to talk about, and certainly you guys are the citizens that see what goes on. We are housed in here a lot, so we have good ideas and good plans. We see what happens in other places, but we're going to bring this to you and we're shopping it to you to see if you agree, if we're trying to meet the goal. Specifically with the downtown, the language might be more architectural heavy, less form-based heavy. But in the business character area, it'll be more form-based, light architecture, but we still have our traditional C1, C2, C3 that we've got to deal with, how we want to deal with parking and buffers and setbacks. So we've got a lot of work ahead. We've kicked them both off. We're doing the initial part for the land development code in-house. We'll hire go out for an RFP, hire a firm to help us, and bring that stuff back and be working on the comprehensive plan as well.
Great.
So we're shooting for a 2045 plan at around 70,000 something residents is what we expect. That's what we're gonna plan for. That means we're gonna be looking at roadway networks. Do we wanna make some do we wanna designate new road corridors as arterials or collectors, or have some that were local roads become collectors? If we do that, then we have to plan for what that means with that increased traffic. Then you have generally less residential local streets, and you've got to plan, then you need to look at land uses. And so, a lot of cool stuff coming on.
Great.
Do you want to say the new bill passed in the Florida legislature? Governor DeSantis signed it. I've received 2 phone calls so far about it. It says this, that on any city and county's commercially zoned or industrial zone land, an affordable housing project can go on there, and the city and county can say nothing about it, and you have to expedite the site plan review. So we could one day, on a nice vacant commercial property, just have a low-income housing, a housing development for low and working income. And it's not that we're against it, it's just typically we do it in a mixed use. You don't have to be mixed use. So.
Mike, I want to add, that will be at the highest density that the city has.
and
It would be at the
highest-
highest density as
Yeah,
well.
right now, our highest density is 16 dwelling units an acre. We
So
are
much for
looking at
home
that
rule.
as part of our comprehensive plan to raise it up to maybe
You know, I'll
24,
move.
20, maybe give density bonuses if you do meet the architecture, but just want to throw that out there.
So much for home rule.
I was gonna say, the Florida League of Cities isn't.
Done.
They did back when it was proposed, but it's
But that
already,
was But they're not, I guess what I'm saying, they're not taking any legal action.
not that I know.
No,
about,
no,
but they're
no
waiting
one's, no one's issued a white paper yet that I know of.
for-
Cool. Anybody else have any other questions for staff?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
We, some months ago, we discussed that we would revisit the ordinance with churches interfering with businesses. I honestly, when I read this, I thought this would have been a good time to put that on here.
Right, so, yes, very good. So we have, when we get to our downtown, you have areas, our alcohol ordinance is not located in the land development code. It's located within the city ordinance. The alcohol ordinance says for an establishment that sells alcohol for consumption or sale, excluding a restaurant that has 45 seats, you are limited to your distancing from a school, it's from door to property of the school that's in use, or a church, door to door. It also talks about outdoor amplification of sound as regard to that, sort of like when Frank's had that outside, it would limit the amount of noise that could be generated. Now, he was a restaurant, but that's just an example. So the brewery, if they had outdoor speakers or a guitarist playing outside, we have regulations that limit that. Within our downtown overlay, or the guidelines we were looking at, you have areas of wide sidewalks. You have the door area, you have the furniture area on the sidewalk. We need to figure out how we're gonna classify that, so we know, then we can begin working on how we're going to provide the opportunities for consumption outside, if we are. That's a city commission decision. Working with someone that does restaurant and alcohol licensing nationwide on things that they've been a part of. But we need to have that discussion, but it's too early because right now, the only scenario we have is our right-of-way goes up to the building and they have seats outside, and if people have a beverage, they're on city property and we don't allow outside consumption. So it needs to happen, but we need to bring you some parameters with that.
Okay.
And not just do a knee jerk on a scenario, so,
I just kind of want to make sure
Yeah.
it's not something we've forgotten about.
right.
That was somewhat important for us.
Yeah, I mean,
See
we've
us trying to
already
grow.
held up 2 churches and a couple restaurants, and, based off of that one little, knee jerk or not, I mean, take one word out of it and everybody be happy.
Yes. I think I know the direction we would go because we had that when the brewery came in. We had the alcohol, the distancing to the churches and the brewery's there and operational, so.
Anybody else?
We don't want to have any Scrivener's errors.
No
so-
scribblers, no scribblers.
No scribblers?
Anybody else? Hey, you got any word on the Wawa? They done anything?
I've reached out to them, they haven't responded. Same thing with the 7-Eleven over at West. I reached out to the tower people, they've sort of all gone silent.
Yeah.
And no
Pruitt,
move on
I
City
think,
Center
Central
either at this
South.
time?
They haven't even mowed the grass.
No, we're having a meeting with them to go over some items.
Great.
I was reading when there was an article on the Andy's Frozen Custard in the West Orange Times, and a lot of the comments on the bottom were, how are we allowing more ice cream? But one guy kept saying, can we get a Wawa? He kept saying, can we get a Wawa? And I wanted to say, we're getting a Wawa, but we should be. We've approved it. They've just got to facilitate the rest of the site plan, so.
All right. On that note, have a great night, everybody. Meeting adjourned.